All right, Fun Time Friday. And I say that with a little bit of sarcasm because, quite frankly, the Friday that you weigh in can be a little bit hectic. It gets a little complicated, a little bit more to do. I got to keep track of my weight throughout the day, that sort of thing. My weight when I get up this morning, Friday morning, about 11 o'clock. I slept a little longer this morning. 196.5. So I actually stepped off the scale, turned to the mirror to check my condition just to see if I was flat as hell or what was going on, but I really wasn't. Felt pretty good about my condition. You know, lean, obviously lean at this point. If I'm not lean at this point, I'm pretty much screwed anyway, and nothing else is going to matter. Pretty dry, but not terribly flat, so I was actually happy with that because I expected once I saw the weight quite a bit lower than I had anticipated, maybe a pound and a half lower than I had anticipated. I thought that my condition might show that as far as being a little flatter, but it didn't, so that was good to see. Obviously at 196.5, it gives me a little bit of extra room. You know, that's almost 2 pounds under the cutoff. So I've got a little extra room. To me, that's kind of bonus points this time. I had to smile because, you know, it takes a little bit of the edge off the day, makes it a little easier, and just that much more likely that I'm not going to have much of a problem making weight. So I'm still going to take a couple precautions though. So I'm going to plan my meals at this point around the fact that I have to weigh in between 7 and 8 o'clock. So I'm going to time my meals. I'm going to get about 3 meals in before I weigh in. First 2 meals are going to be solid meals. That's going to be about 11:30 and 2 roughly. Again, sodium isn't going to change. I'm going to keep my sodium where it is. I'm going to keep my water where it is, but I might play with my water a little bit if push comes to shove, if I have to play with it a little bit before I weigh in, if I happen to be close to the cutoff. Again, it'll depend on what my weight does during the day, what the patterns are and that sort of thing. And of course I'm going to take weight, like I said, 6, 7, 8 times just to make sure that I know what it's doing before a meal versus after and that sort of thing. So 2 solid meals, 11:30, 2:30. The last meal before I weigh in, I'm going to actually have a protein drink with a little bit of peanut butter. I feel like the fact that it not being solid is going to help out with weight a little bit. Not much, but hell, if it comes down to a 1/4 pound, you know what? Sometimes these little things can add up. If it allows me to take in a little bit more fluid instead of having to cut it back a little before I weigh in, that's always a bonus too, because again, I don't want to play with my water at this point any more than I have to. I always say, and I always tell my clients and everybody else, you don't want to play with your water to make weight if you don't have to. You want to play with your water and cut your water, control your water based almost entirely on condition alone. You start messing around with it too much to make weight and it's going to start affecting your condition, and that is the last thing you want. I heard some guys when I finally got to the weigh-in that were saying, well, you know, I haven't eaten anything and drank anything all day because I just got to make weight. And you know, my response to that, I kept it to myself in this particular situation because I don't ever want to derail someone or give them a sense that they're doing anything wrong at that point that they really can't correct anyway. And quite frankly, they didn't ask me, so I wasn't going to give up advice that wasn't solicited, or an opinion that wasn't solicited. So what that is, that's a dangerous move. You don't ever want to make weight at all costs. It does you no good to drop 4 or 5 pounds or 2 or 3 pounds to make weight if you're giving up condition to get there. So if you happen to be a few pounds over the cutoff, and you don't feel like you can get that weight off without messing up or impacting your condition negatively, then just leave it alone. You're much better going into the higher weight class with good condition that you are comfortable with, that you believe in, than making drastic changes, giving up condition, looking flat, whatever, just to get into a weight class. It's just not a very, in my opinion, it's not a very good idea. And quite frankly, if you think it's a good idea, that's okay if that's what you want to do. Myself, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to. If it's a 1/2 pound, if it's a 1/4 pound, that's completely different. That's a small piss. That's taking an extra 45 minutes and weighing in again and being down and making the cutoff. That's completely different. So what I'm going to do with my meals too is I'm going to change out my eggs today as a precaution, and I'm just going to do all chicken breast. Now, you think to yourself, well, you're going against your own advice. You're changing something, changing a variable that you don't have to change. Not a bad argument, other than the fact that my body's already used to the chicken breast. I'm not putting a food in that my body is not accustomed to. Okay, I'm not even changing the entire meal. Remember, half of my protein is coming from chicken breast, the other half is coming from egg whites. So all I'm doing is taking out the egg whites because it's more voluminous, and I am putting in, I'm replacing it with chicken. Something that I am essentially used to. I feel like it's not taking up as much space, it doesn't have as much moisture, it doesn't weigh as much. You know what? If that couple meals comes out to be 1/4 pound, and then I have to cut a half a liter of water before I go on to weigh in, then that's great. That's something that I'm willing to do. And again, I've thought about it. I've weighed out the cost to benefit ratio, the risk, the consequence, what I have to gain, and I'm comfortable with that change. So I'm going to do that for the first 2 meals. I'm going to keep my sodium the same, which was another option. I could have cut my sodium back just a little bit. I'm not comfortable doing that either. Most people, when you drop your sodium, it's the fastest way to go flat. Myself, as soon as I drop sodium, boom, gone. My vascularity goes down. I understand that I'm not judged on vascularity, but the reality is an appearance of vascularity still lends itself to your definition, to your condition, and that sort of thing. As an example, you're not going to be vascular and fat. It just isn't usually going to happen that way. When you're lean, when you're tight, when you're dry, and you've got vascularity, it's a good combination. The point is, too, is even if you're losing vascularity, and the vascularity doesn't matter, anytime you're losing vascularity, trust me when I say that your muscles are going flat. You're going flat, you're losing fluid, that's why the veins are disappearing. Okay? So, I'm going to make the minor change, like I said, with the food. I'm going to keep everything else constant. I'm even taking in the normal amount of water that I normally take in until I see something in my weight throughout the day that I don't like or I'm not comfortable with, or if my weight is going up too much. Now, when I say I'm going to take my weight, it's important to me, based on my experience of doing this in the past, to make weight not only with myself, but of course with clients. You got to take that weight before a meal and you got to take it after a meal. Because you have to see what impact that meal is having, not only the food, but the food and the fluid. Okay? So some people panic and they say, and I'll just use my weight as an example. I weigh in at 196.5, I have my first meal, and I hit 198.5. Okay, just slightly over the cutoff, but again, we're talking, it's almost noon, I've got 7 hours before I weigh in, and I'm 1/4 pound over. Plus, I've just taken in a liter of water. You ever don't think that, water weighs that much? You ought to weigh a liter of water, okay, because it's pretty substantial. Okay, the food that I'm eating, really, wasn't a whole lot there. You're talking about, 9 ounces of chicken breast that's already been cooked, so that probably only weighs about 6.5, 7 ounces. A little bit of mustard, a little bit of soy, and some broccoli. Not a whole lot of weight there, but you got to come out to 2 pounds when it comes down to scale weight, okay? So 198.5 after that first meal. Before my second meal, I'm already back down to 197. So far I'm liking it. I'm looking at it going, okay, water I'm taking in, I'm pushing out. My condition is staying good. I look dry. I'm in a pretty good spot here coming into my second meal. After the second meal, I do go up to 201, okay? So now you're looking at about 4 pounds, okay? Tough one here because I'd been on my feet as well doing my tan stain. Now, again, just speaking for myself, when I'm on my feet, I tend to hold more water for some reason. I don't know and can't explain it. I have no idea. When I lay down, I tend to move water or pee more. It's not drastic, it's not huge, it just is what it is. Just a pattern I've noticed over several shows that just really it was just so obvious that I couldn't deny it. So I look at the weight and I think to myself, okay, yeah, 201. I still have plenty of time before I weigh in. I've got more fluid in me. I haven't cut any water at this point. Still taking it in at a liter at a time. And I think it's going to be important to note too. Please understand that it's not just a liter with the second meal or the first meal and then a liter with the second meal. I had a liter in there between meals as well. I always have a liter between and have water in between meals. So we're talking 2 liters difference from the last time. So of course you can look at the weight and you can say, okay, that makes complete sense based on the fact that a liter of water is quite heavy, probably a couple pounds. I haven't weighed it, but that's essentially what it's going to come out to, 1.5 pounds, something like that. So I also know how fast I move it. So I figure, if I had to cut it right now before the next meal, I'm going to probably be down again another 1.5 pounds, possibly 2 pounds, it just depends. So anyway, real quick, I am putting on my tan stain, and I'll come back to that in a minute, talk a little bit about my tan stain, because I made some changes this year with my color that I was actually very happy with. So I have this second solid meal. I have one more meal left before I'm going to do the weigh-in. It's going to be about 4:30, and of course I'm going to weigh in between 7 and 8. It's going to be a protein meal. I actually decided that I'm going to cut the water a little bit because before that meal I was 198, and I thought, you know what? Give myself a little bit of room here. I don't want to push it and miss it by a quarter of a pound or something stupid. Or when it comes to a quarter or a half pound, it's relatively insignificant when it comes to conditioning. You know, if I happen to have to cut a half a liter of water, it's not going to impact my condition. I can put it right back in and drink that as soon as I come off the scale as far as weighing in. I don't plan on cutting my water until 8, 9, 10 o'clock, so it's not going to impact my condition as far as that is concerned. So I feel pretty good about it. I'm thinking to myself, you know what? I'm going to cut my water a little bit with the protein, make the protein drink a little thicker. That'll be about 4:30. And I think what I'll do is I'll keep my water out until I weigh in. So I make this my plan. I'm good with it. It sounds logical. And of course, I'm taking a meal with me. That as soon as I come off the scale and I sit down to have the competitor meeting, I'm going to sit there and I'm going to eat my meal and I'm going to have my water. And I'll be fully hydrated within, 20 minutes and be just fine, even from going a couple hours without water. It was kind of added insurance in a sense that if I'm 198 coming into this small protein meal or protein drink meal, certainly the peanut butter doesn't weigh much anything, and I cut my water for a couple hours and don't take in that extra 1 liter of water in between meals which is essentially between the protein drink meal and the meal that I would have after I come off the scale, that's another pound. It's just a little bit of insurance. So I'm good with this. I think this is just fucking brilliant, okay? I'm just super genius at this point. And again, I just need to remind you that everything is going according to plan. Everything is predictable. I'm really confident at this point. I like my condition. I am contemplating, starting to think to myself, gosh, I might have to load because, I'm a little flat. I don't know. But I'm like, I'll leave it up to whether I make the light heavies or make the heavies. If I make the heavies, I can't come in looking emaciated. I may have to fill out a little bit more than if I'm in the light heavies because I'm going to not be much smaller than anybody else in the light heavies. I'm not going to get blown away on size in the light heavy division like I could potentially get blown away in the heavies by some guy who weighs 20 more pounds than I do. So anyway, I'm good with where I am. I've stopped weighing myself at this point. I'm good. I'm at 198. I know I'm going to cut my water. I haven't had a big meal. I'm good. I get ready to go to the weigh-in. I take my food with me. I leave on time. I got no stress. I make my drive through the canyon. I get to the venue. I'm early. I'm in line, one of the first couple guys in line, which I always try to do so that I can not be put under a microscope when I'm there because not everybody gets there on time. And you'd think it was the Olympia, the way everybody watches everybody and is so worried about what everybody looks like one day out. Let me tell you this. If you're paying attention to what everybody looks like at the weigh-in the day before your show, you might as well forget it because you can't tell shit, or not much anyway, about who's going to kick your ass in 12 hours. Most of the people that are going to come in and do well the next day, they're not on. They're not close. Maybe they have pushed down and they're dry and they're flat. Because they need to make weight, they haven't loaded yet. Maybe they're watery because they haven't moved their water weight yet because they don't care about making the weight class. Everybody has a different protocol. Everybody uses a different prep guy. There's just so many different things that happen, and so much can happen in 12 hours that it's just not even worth worrying. Another thing I need to point out is someone can be standing next to you in a registration room, ballroom type thing, and just look like a badass. And you can think to yourself, oh my God, this guy's going to win the whole thing. And then he gets up there and takes 7th in his class. It's really hard to tell. I've been doing this for a long time, not only as a competitor, but as a prep guy, as a judge. I've been backstage. I've been, from the judging panel, watching and judging, and I've been to registration and helping out with registration. And it just never ceases to amaze me how you cannot tell who's going to kick whose ass until everybody gets under those lights and you're able to be compared. You just can't tell. I remember being at juniors in 2009 backstage going, you know what, I'm not in over my head. I'm comparable. These guys aren't like beasts like I thought they would be. And then I watched the sons of bitches walk out underneath the lights and wondered where in the hell they came from and if I was somehow in the Bantam class on accident and these guys were heavies. It was just day and night. And then they'd walk off stage and stand next to me, and I'd think to myself, now I'm back to thinking you're not that impressive. It just depends. Some people look great underneath the lights and they go out there and they open a can of whoop ass. And other people look incredible backstage and look like shit under the lights. So it just depends, and you're not going to know until you get out there. There is no sense even bothering with it, stressing over it. Put blinders on. Try not to give a shit and just keep to yourself. So anyway, I get to the check-in. I hop up on the scale, and I know the guy doing the weigh-in because I pretty much know everybody here locally who runs the shows and stuff like that. And I look at Curtis, and I looked up. I said, "That's the cutoff right there." And he looks back down. He goes, "Yeah, I know." And he took it to 200 pounds, and he had to shift the bottom weight from 150 to 200 pounds, and then we went to 200 and a quarter. I wasn't just off. I was off 2 full pounds. So the question, of course, from him was, "Hey, do you want to try to lose the weight?" And I thought to myself, this isn't a quarter pound, this isn't a half pound. Of course, it's racing through my head. How could I possibly fuck this up when I have not been over but once today, and that was after a meal, and now I'm 2 pounds over. So I'm having a hard time thinking that and listening to him at the same time. But I get off the scale and I said, "No, I'll think about it for just a second. Go ahead and set that aside." So I went into the bathroom and I looked at my condition, and I immediately knew the right thing to do, even as disappointed as I was. Things like that to people like me are considered a failure. Of course, I put a positive spin on it, and I did decide that, hey, I'm going to compete as a heavy. I'm not going to try to drop 2 pounds that I don't even know that I can at this point. And, I had a half hour, essentially, to give up the condition that I had, that I was very confident in, just to get down into the light heavies and potentially give up that condition. I didn't want to do that. So I quickly made up my decision, went back in and told him that I was going to stay. But, of course, this was weighing on me like a lead balloon. Because of the fact that I'm looking at it, I'm disappointed. I'm looking at it as a failure. I don't miss weight classes. My clients rarely miss weight classes, rarely. And I'm trying to figure out how this even happened to begin with. So to make a long story short, the only thing that really could have happened, even though there were several people that didn't make their weight class either, whether it be from welter to middle to light heavy, that was a calibrated scale. It was a medical scale. It wasn't wrong. I'm not going to sit here and say that the scale was wrong and look for an out. Apparently what had happened is my scale at home was wrong, and I had no idea. Very disappointing, of course. But at that point, this is when push comes to shove, and you just sit there and you go, look, I can dwell on the fact that my scale was off, and I can be a little boo-hoo bitch and complain about the fact that I got to go into the heavies, or I can change, my plan. I can take a look at my plan, see what needs to be changed, and make the adjustments that I need to, if any at all. At this point, I don't even know if I have to make any changes. And I have to decide, hey, what am I going to do? So I decided, there wasn't a whole lot I could do at that point. I was going to compete successfully as a heavy. I was going to see what I could do, and at least I was going to bring my condition. And my plan always is to show up and be the best conditioned guy there. Win, lose, or draw, there ain't a whole lot I can do about someone showing up kicking my ass in size or structure or that sort of thing. Genetically, I'm average. Maybe I'm even below average. As far as a competitive bodybuilder, I'm mediocre. I've said that a million times. I'm not a national level bodybuilder. I'm a regional guy. And if the field is mediocre or average, I'm going to win. If the field that I show up in is above average, I'm going to place second, third, fourth. And that's how it's always been. I compete because I love it. I don't compete because I'm good at it. I'm very good at conditioning. That's what I go with. That's what I consider myself, and many others consider myself to be an expert in, and that's what I focus on, and that's what I was going to stay focused on. So I go back home from the weigh-in. Of course, I had my meal at the competitor meeting. Spoke with a couple guys. Actually met a couple cool guys that didn't seem to be meatheads. They actually had other things to talk about other than what they ate that day and how they were going to kick everybody's ass and how shredded their glutes were and basically trying to get me to tune into their me show. But I met a couple guys that were real cool, and a couple of them I had known but had not spoken to, so that was kind of nice. Had my meal, got a liter of water in me, hit my first, this is roughly about 8 o'clock, hit my first half, I'll just say my first dose of diuretic at that point. Mild, I won't get into the specifics because I don't feel I need to give that up, but at the same time, just mild dose, half a half tab at 8 o'clock, knowing that I'm going to come back at 1 a.m., hit another half tab, and at 6 a.m. Saturday morning half tab, and that's the only dosing that I do. I sometimes do not use anything. At this point though, the plan was going to be there so that I showed up dry as I could get. The fact that I was already relatively full and not too emaciated and flat, felt good about it. Wasn't going to be a dosing that was, or a dosage protocol that was going to affect me if I decided to load, when I decided to load, that sort of thing. Again, just kind of an added component to to help me to dry out. Something that I have used 70% of the time in some capacity in 70% of my shows, and very well with very positive results. So anyway, I hit that, got my liter of water in me, finished up the meeting, got home, and I don't live very close to the venue. I live up in the mountains, about 35 minutes outside of Denver, west of Denver. So I get home, and for shits and giggles, I stand on the scale, and the scale read 197. And I only laugh because that's all I could really do at that point, was kind of laugh it off. I was either that or laugh or cry, I always say. So I decided to laugh, and like I said, I already made the decision to deal with it. I was going to go into the heavies. What I had to do at that point, when I stepped off the scale though, is I needed to decide whether I was going to load. I was in the heavies. I already knew that I wanted to load. I wanted to make sure that I was plenty full. I did feel like I could fill out without giving up much, if any, condition at all. But in figuring out and really mulling over what my plan to load was going to be, whether it was going to be immediately start loading and load the rest of the night till I go to bed, load right before I go to bed, load in the morning only, I wanted to take into consideration, I wanted to consider, hey, am I willing to give up a little bit of dryness to get this fullness to go into the heavies? Okay, and you gotta really put yourself in my spot and think about this for a second as far as logic is concerned. Going into the heavies, I already know I've got a good chance to be the tightest heavyweight in the lineup. My condition is already good, and I feel strong, I feel confident with my condition at this point. Am I willing to give up a little bit of that dryness going into the heavies, knowing that I'm going to be right up there at the top of the condition, possibly the best condition in the class, to get that fullness to be able to stand there? Because remember, I'm going in as a heavyweight at 200 pounds. Okay, the cutoff is like, there are guys that are going to be up in there 223, 224. So essentially, they're going to be, could be well over 20 pounds bigger than I am. So on the one hand, you think, okay, I'm going to gain some fullness and I'm going to be able to stand with them. On the other hand, you think, is it really going to matter if I try to fill out? Because some of these guys are heavy by 20 pounds. Me filling out isn't going to, it might not mean shit in the end, standing next to them from a relative standpoint. Do I continue to just make sure that my conditioning is the best that it can be so that I can separate myself from the field based on condition alone and at least have people go, damn, Skip is tight as shit, he's the tightest dude up, that sort of thing. So what I decided to do was I decided to go with the condition and based my loading around that. So I didn't load right away. I had another clean meal. I actually had to go back, and this is where I'm going to touch on my color for just a minute. I've always come in to shows being one of the guys with the best color. I've always used a Pro-Tan Diaderm combination 50-50, gone with 3 or 4 coats, couple Thursday, couple Friday, that sort of thing, and my protocol is pretty solid in coming out with really good color. What I did notice is this is a new venue that this show is at, and they use the same venue only for about the last year, so it's only been about 3 or 4 shows there. But this venue was the venue that they did the last show that I did in the summer, and I noticed from the pictures, I thought to myself, I just don't appear as dark. Everybody doesn't look as dark as normal, so the lighting was a lot brighter than what I'm used to. And I thought to myself, I could stand to be a little bit darker and get away with it under these really bright lights. So I started looking around for a little bit darker. I actually even contemplated using Dream Tan again. I haven't used it in years, but under really, really bright lights, it looks really good. And it looks like shit under lights that aren't really bright. But anyway, I decided not to do that because of the stuff just feels like shit. I feel like I rolled around in doo-doo or something, or lotion and dirt and crap, and it's just not a very good feeling. You're slimy, it gets on everything, that sort of thing. So I thought, I'll check this out. I came across a product called Liquid Sun Rays. And some of the guys on the boards are going to laugh, or on the Intense Muscle are going to laugh, because I asked about it. I've had a couple clients use it that really liked it, and had a couple clients use it that said they didn't really like it a whole lot. So I decided before I was going to use it and screw up something that was so minor. You know, it's a bitch if you get your diet right, your training right, you put in all this time and effort and money, and then you screw up something stupid like your color, and it impacts what you look like on stage. So I did my homework, got me some liquid sun rays, a couple bottles actually, just to make sure that I was covered, and I put on a coat on Friday morning, let it dry and set up, and went to the registration. And people were shocked at how dark it was. I was essentially black, and most people who know me, I'm dark as hell anyway. I get a good tan, and I have a tanner here at home, and I'm usually tan most of the time. This was over the edge. I mean, it was so dark that I decided when I came home from registration and weigh-in that I was actually going to rinse it off, a little bit of it off, and put a coat on that was actually lighter. So I did that, and if anybody's thinking about using it, I still have some on me now. But most of it came off actually really well. Love the stuff. Absolutely love the color on stage. Love the way that it's set up. It didn't run, it didn't streak. You just have to be careful to not put it on too dark. It can go on and literally just look black. So you have to be careful with that. But it came off real well. It's not alcohol based, so it doesn't dry your skin out like Protan does. It actually has my skin actually felt pretty moist, like it was a moisturizer in a sense. Will not come off until you get into the shower, and it comes off relatively easily. So I liked it. I put another coat on that Friday night. Of course, let it set up and just kind of laid around, that sort of thing. Didn't have to mess with it at all Saturday morning, which I never like to mess with my color or my tan on Saturday morning anyway. But good color, definitely recommend it. Not terribly expensive, and one bottle will cover you. I mean, it covered me for 2 coats without any problem at all. So I decided again, I'm going to go and I'm going to load, but I got my clean meals out of the way, and I figured I'm going to go to bed about 2 o'clock in the morning, and I'm going to get up about 8, so I want to make sure I got myself about 6 hours. So I am going to load. I'm going to start my load at about 1 o'clock, and I'm going to load hard for about an hour. Alright, so I'm going to load myself at 1 o'clock, so I know I'm going to have to prep some food here. Not much, because I've got quite a bit here that's ready to go. But I did make up, some pancakes, some waffles, that sort of thing, got ready. Made up some snickerdoodles, low-fat snickerdoodles, just things that I'm used to. I'm going to load again. You got to load on the same foods that your body's used to loading on. You just can't throw something in there, oh, well, this sounds good, and your body's not used to it, especially when it's so close to the show. Because again, it comes back to the issues with variables. And if you're going to put those variables in there that you're not sure and that aren't predictable and you don't know what's going to, it's just a bad idea. Stay with the things that are predictable. Stay with the things that your body's used to so that you know and can predict the outcome. So I prep my food, I get ready to go. I started at 1 o'clock, and part of the reason that I started it the night before was because when I load before I go to bed, I don't have to worry about distension through my stomach. As the years go by, I have to deal with more and more issues with distension and that sort of thing when it comes to volume of food. But when I load before bed, I can literally stuff myself. And by the time the morning comes around, I'm not distended. I don't have any abdominal rounding out or anything else. So I knew that I could load hard and get a lot of carbs in, as opposed to if I started in the morning, I have to keep the volume of food lower, which in a sense, it's going to keep the amount of carbs lower, so it's going to potentially limit me from filling out as much as I could. And if I push it too hard, then I'm going to have a hard time controlling my abs, keeping them in. It's not while I'm posing. Most anybody, if you hit an ab shot, you can keep your abs tight and keep them in. It's in between the poses when you're breathing. It's transitioning from one pose to the other. You can't stay tight 100% of the time. You just can't do it. So even when you're standing in a front relaxed position and you're you're in your quarter turn, or you're standing there waiting for the call for the next pose, your abs aren't tight enough and they're gonna look big for someone who easily distends if they've got too much food in them. So half of the logic here is to start the night before so that I can just push and push and push and push and get as much food as I can in and not have to deal with the distension in the morning. And then in the morning, I'm still going to load. but I'm going to load with a lower volume. I'm not going to stuff myself. I'm just going to get myself full, and I'm going to wait another hour, hour and a half, 2 hours, depending on hunger and that sort of thing, and load again. And in a sense, I'm going to load with 2 or 3 smaller meals with smaller portions so that I don't have to deal with distension. I'm going to get as many carbs in as I can, because at that point my water is going to be controlled, so I'm not going to have any spillover. I'm not having any issues with spilling over and having glycogen stores too full, because part of the reason I have gone flat is because of it being the load last Sunday and the amount of time since then. Of course, I had trained 3 times, I'd gotten a pump, I had gotten rid of some glycogen, that sort of thing. So yes, I'm flat a little bit from water, but I'm just as equally as flat from a lack of glycogen, and a lack of carbs. So these carbs are going to do me well. I'm doing 2 things at once. This is tricky, and if you don't know what you're doing, it can be difficult to get a handle on. I'm actually drying out, losing water, getting harder at the same time that I'm loading. Okay? Not a terribly easy thing to do unless you know what you're doing with your body. If you're going to attempt this based on what I'm telling you right now that I did, honestly, it's so likely you're going to screw yourself that I'll try not to laugh. That is not saying, oh, you must work with me or you must work with somebody. All I'm saying is your best bet is not to approach it this way unless you know exactly what you're doing, because to accomplish both of these things, moving water and loading and filling out at the same time, is difficult to do unless you have the experience to do it. Or you have someone with you who knows what the hell they're doing. And even then, when I work with a client and try to do both those things at one time, it is much harder than doing both of those things at separate times. Either controlling the water first and then loading, or loading and then controlling the water. The latter is much easier, and of course that's the premise for the skip loading anyways, to get loaded, fill and spill, control the water, hit the stage, and fuck everybody up. Okay? Punish time, or time to punish. I don't know what the hell it was my wife called it. Time to punish. That's what it's called. So anyway, I'm going to do both these at the same time. I'm confident doing this because I've done this so many times myself that it's ridiculous. I know exactly how I'm going to respond. Now, another thing that the load is going to do, not only am I going to fill out, but it's going to help to suck water, because when I took that last liter in at the meeting, I also cut my water 1 hour later. So I have started my diuretic protocol, which is mild, relatively speaking, but I've cut my water as well. I've cut it late in the day, but I've cut it. So I'm going to load without the water. What happens when you load without water? It dries you out even more. Okay, I'm going to put in all these carbs, starting this load at 1 o'clock and then going to bed at 2. I'm going to eat so many carbs until literally I can't eat anymore. Okay, I'm not going to make myself sick, but I'm going to get pretty darn close. Okay, I'm going to take in as much as I can till I'm borderline uncomfortable. All right, so at the same time, I'm not taking in water. The carbs that I'm eating in large quantities are going to scavenge, and they're going to go looking for water. They need water because they need to form glycogen to store these carbs as glycogen, and to do that you got to have water. There's only 3 places that the body's going to pull water from to store glycogen, or to put together with the carbs to store glycogen. One is from the organs. That's not going to happen because that's life or death situation. The other one is from muscles. It's not going to take it from the muscle because that's where it wants to put it. That's where it's going to store the glycogen. The only other place is the 3rd place, and that's underneath the skin. You take the surface area of the skin, you've got quite a bit of water there too, even when you've already cut your water. It obviously can't get water from you drinking because you're not drinking anymore. So what's going to happen is, as I do this load, I'm going to start to get rid of less and less water as far as peeing, because my body is going to hang on to some of that water to put it with the carbs to store it as glycogen. Okay? That becomes torturous in the sense that, trust me when I say, if you could go without water or food, it is a whole lot easier to go without food. When you start a load, your mouth will dry up like you've got sand in it, because those carbs are going to start sucking water like nothing. It's just crazy. Anybody who's watching this who's done it is shaking their head smiling right now going, yeah, that fucking sucks, dude. You're right, Skip. Or maybe you wouldn't say it like that, but anyway, that's what I'm thinking. That's how I think you're saying it. Which helps as well, because when you go to bed, of course, you don't have to deal with the thirst. So between the starting of the mild diuretic protocol, the cutting of water, and the carbohydrates being added in large quantities, the drying out process is going to speed up dramatically. I anticipate that when I wake up in the morning on Saturday morning, I'm going to look slightly less retarded than Sarah Palin's kid. Oh, that was bad. That'll have to be edited out. I love Sarah Palin, and I think Lil Trig is a cutie. I just really thought that drove my point home. But anyway, I anticipate waking up in the morning very dry. Am I going to be 100% ready to go in the morning? No. You never wake up ready to go show on the morning of the show at 100%, because if you are, you're still 6 or 8 hours off. Okay, you're not going to hit this. I'm not going to hit the stage till noon, 1 o'clock. That's when I want to peak. All right. Yeah, peaking 4 or 5 hours prior isn't a bad thing, because you're not going to lose too much between. But you know what? I'm an OCD son of a bitch. I'm a controlling son of a bitch. And when I say I want to get it right, and what I'm shooting for isn't just getting it right, it's really perfection. And perfection to me is peaking within an hour of the time that you hit the stage. So that is the plan. I throw down all these foods. I go crazy. I'm having pancakes. And no, I am not watching out. I always love this question. Well, you can't have liquid carbs. They have to be dry. Yeah, you know what? That sounds great on paper, because I know the dry carbs, I get where you're going. The dry carbs suck up all the water and everything else. Look, if you're going to be that dry and you're not going to have enough fluid, the easiest way to not fill out is not have enough fluid. If you don't have enough water in you, you're not drinking enough water, you're not going to fill out. Then you have to add water to fill out, because you've got plenty of carbs in you, but you don't have enough fluid. So there's a balance there. Look, I'm not going to not use syrup or jelly in my homemade jelly, pineapple jalapeno, on sale at the Intense Muscle store, or soon to be, I don't know. No, it's not on sale. But anyway, it's good stuff. I use that. That's made with sugar, by the way. It's not high fructose corn syrup. It's just regular sugar. But the point is those are more, they're not dry carbs. So before I get the question of don't they have to be dry, no, they don't. They just don't. I take that into consideration. And again, if I switch to just dry carbs, I'm going against the plan that I've used every week that is predictable. And I know how my body reacts, and how it fills out, and how it doesn't fill out, and how dry I get, what my weight does, and that sort of thing. So I'm not going to change that. Okay? If it comes to the morning and I wake up in the morning and I'm not as dry as I think, you know what? Maybe I'll do a little bit more dry carbs. But I'm not going to give the dry carbs any more credit than they're due. It's not like eating a sponge. It's not like all of a sudden, and you just dry up into a prune and you become a little badass that doesn't cramp and you just go up there and whoop everybody's ass. I won't dismiss it as it's insignificant, because it's not insignificant. I just don't want to give it any more credit than, quite frankly, than it deserves.